Dear Presidents, Vice Presidents, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome at the first day of the Fundamental Science and Higher Education Workshop organized jointly by the Alliance of International Science Organizations, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. My name is Gergely Böhm. I'm currently the head of the President's Office at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, and as the facilitator of today's event, I will guide you through the program of the following 3 hours, consisting of a session of welcome remarks, lectures, and finally a panel discussion. First of all, let me introduce to you the chair of the session, Professor Csaba Play. Professor Play is a psychologist and linguist. He is a member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and of Academia Europaea. His empirical research is concentrated on the cross-linguistic study of language processing and language development, and issues of developmental language disorders. Since January this year, he has been the co-chair of the Methodology of Science Education thematic mission of the newly established Knowledge Hub of Academia Europaea in Budapest. With this short introduction, may I invite Professor Play to take over and chair the session from now on.
Thank you so much for the possibility of participating in this very interesting event of international scientific cooperation. The first day of this two-day webinar is organized by the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. We're going to have a few greeting remarks, and the first greeting remark is going to be made by Ferenc Hudec, Vice President for Natural Sciences of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Professor Hudec is a professor of organic chemistry at Eötvös Loránd University. His main fields of research include design of synthetic antigens using peptide epitopes for vaccine and diagnostic development, and the design of drug delivery systems using macromolecular carriers. Of course, he has several hundred scientific papers along this area, and he will give his introductory remarks or speech on the future of basic science, challenges and responsibility of universities. He's especially adequate for this task because for 2 terms, he had been the rector of Eötvös Loránd University, Budapest. Mr. Vice President, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this nice introduction. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or honorable distinguished speakers, dear colleagues, and all guests who are following us via the internet from South America to the Far East. In my capacity as the Vice President of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences and on behalf of the organizing committee, it is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you to our global online workshop devoted to one of the key issues of human societies. This workshop should be regarded as an important milestone in the series of events started almost 5 years ago. In November 2016, on the initiative of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the first International Science Forum of National Scientific Organizations of the Belt and Road Initiative was held in Beijing. The declaration released at the end of this forum, also signed by the Secretary General of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, provided a good guidance for our future collective actions. Accordingly, the participating national and international organizations have been committed to establish a long-term efficient cooperation mechanism between their institutions. The Hungarian Academy of Sciences played an active role in the foundation of the Alliance of International Science Organizations, ANSO, in 2018, together with 37 research and higher education organizations around the world. In the wake of the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we, as a member of the governing board, welcomed the idea to organize a series of topic-focused online meetings by ANSO members and partners on topics of some key issues of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. These are listed in the slides. One of them is about our topic for this 2 days workshop, the fundamental science and higher education. The justification behind the themes of the workshop taking place today and tomorrow emanated from the belief that the future well-being and prosperity of the world was tied to basic science and eminent universities. This was explicitly recognized by the World Science Forum in November 2019 and by the UNESCO, which designated 2022 as the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development, supported by the United Nations General Assembly. At this point, let me single out of the crucial topics which are listed in the agenda of this workshop. This is the question of how to treat the innovation perspectives in the higher education, with special regard to challenges of fundamental science in ANSO countries. Before giving the floor to distinguished speakers, let me take this opportunity to make some general remarks and touch briefly on the development of universities in relation to the fundamental science. The complexity of the issue derives partly from the great diversity of higher education. Universities around the world show marked differences concerning their stage of development. Are they newly formed, or do they have a rich history? What can we say about their geographical location? Do they work in a rural or urban area? Do they hold a leading position locally, regionally, or are they genuinely globally players? What are their research and training activities focusing on? Can they sustain a full scope of educational profile, or they have specialized limited fields? Universities have significant differences in terms of their achievements and also in terms of the difficulties that they are facing. Let me bring up the question of ownership here, which is of direct relevance to when it comes to funding. The global trend shows a more from university research towards technology and innovation. The funding of fundamental science is often placed in a subordinate position in national and research development policies. This could be due to the misunderstanding of its role. Frequently, the direct contribution of fundamental science to innovation and economic growth is underestimated. As basic research cannot bring immediate benefits and tangible value for money for the investors, finding other alternative fundraising tools for basic research projects is highly essential. The role of funding in this respect is one of the most difficult tasks for the state-owned and private institution of higher education. This can be considered as a hot topic. If we talk about the development of universities in relation to fundamental sciences, we have to pay particular attention to the multiple mission of universities. These include teaching, research activities, and also the dissemination of cultural values. And as we know, there are also some financial considerations. In my view, we can identify different strategies for the future development of higher education institutions. The current global trends of the last few years suggest two main avenues. Some universities are trying to identify appropriate partners, develop exchange programs, and establish local and/or regional networks of independent institutions. Another strategy is to create campuses at geographically different sites on a regional or global scale. Successful examples of both approaches are available worldwide. It could be a special challenge for us to discuss our topics today in the light of the development of higher education institutions. Anyhow, it is advisable to formulate a strategy based on the thorough and comprehensive analysis of the university in question and the higher education system it is a part of. These considerations were listed in the slide. Finally, let me quote here Professor Charles Kennel from the University of California, who stated, think globally, analyze regionally, and act locally. That can be a motto for the today's workshop. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and colleagues, first I would like to thank for the support and preparatory work of the secretariats of ANSO and also the secretariats of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. These were a very dedicated challenge, and I'm sure that the success will be with us. Now the floor is yours, and the opportunity is there to exchange existing practices and elaborate on future thoughts. I would like to wish you all the very best for the stimulating and fruitful workshop. Thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor and Vice President Hures, for this remarkable introduction that has highlighted some of the key issues of the upcoming webinar for 2 days. As you presented on your slides, ANSO is much committed in a very complex way to the issue of coordinating research and society and university relationships. The next introductory speech is going to be given by Professor Mohammed Qasim Jan, who is the Vice President of ANSO and the immediate past President of the Pakistan Academy of Sciences. He has been the Vice Chancellor of 3 Pakistani universities. His research has been basically in geology, mineralogy, petrology, geochemistry, and tectonics. Dear President John, we are awaiting to hear your opening address, please. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, dear participants, I would like to compliment the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and ANSO for convening this webinar on a topic of immense importance, that is fundamental science and higher education. I also welcome warmly all the speakers and participants in this webinar. Basic research or fundamental science, let's call it fundamental research, is a part of the topic-focused online webinar series of ANSO. In accordance with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, ANSO objectives include international cooperation in science, technology, innovation, and capacity building. Before I go any further on the topic, let me inform you, please, that the Pakistan Academy of Sciences has provided work-based support in the establishment of ANSO, and I'm happy to say that our academy was among the founding members, like the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. We had meetings before the establishment of ANSO in Islamabad, in which Hungarian Academy also participated. So there is a long history of collaboration regarding ANSO activities. Higher education and sciences are closely connected, and good quality science, research, and innovation cannot be pursued without capacity building through a sound regime of higher education, which in turn is dependent on primary and secondary education. The universities have traditionally played a very important role in contribution to science through fundamental research. Fundamental research is essential for understanding natural processes, the world, and now beyond. It promotes education and culture, nurtures new knowledge, lies at the core of innovation, and stimulates technology and industry through offshoots. Basic research is essential for training future professionals and strengthening knowledge societies, as you would have seen in the document that was distributed to you. Unfortunately, since the early 1990s, there is a global trend of giving low priority to fundamental research in favor of applied research in national R&D policies, especially in the developing countries. Hence, the noticeable shifting from fundamental research towards innovation and technology would influence the career of young researchers as well as impact the future of science. I don't know in what way. The fund shortage, critical demands, and needs of the society are leading to a situation where universities would have to make realistic adjustments, but hopefully not at the cost of fundamental research, which provides the foundation for applied research. I would like to quote from a very interesting document that was prepared in 1945 by a group of people led by the then United States Presidential Science Advisor, Bush. And that document argues that, in inverted commas, money spent on basic research would sooner or later contribute to wealth, health, and national security, and that one should not worry too much about exactly what form of these benefits might take and when they might occur. Inverted commas closed. And I would like to invite you to look at the application of the first spark of electricity, a purely academic activity. Look at the splitting of the atom and discovery of the X-rays. These fundamental discoveries and many others ultimately have expanded into unthinkable dimension of development of technology and help support to humanity. But unfortunately, who will convince the policymakers and leadership about the importance of fundamental research? This is a very serious debate currently going on in Pakistan, that they have started discouraging fundamental research in favor of applied research. In my opinion, the university should develop an education system with a balanced integration of basic and applied research. Ladies and gentlemen, this workshop will discuss to adopt innovation perspectives into higher education system with special attention to challenges of fundamental science in ANSO countries. My predecessor speaker already threw light on these and the item that will be discussed in this particular conference. Before ending, I thank you all and wish you successful deliberations. Stay blessed. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Vice President John, for these remarkable thoughts. Our third introductory welcoming speaker is going to represent the UNESCO. The UNESCO was always instrumental in the work of the ANSO Alliance. Her director of the Division of Science Policy is Dr. Peggy Oti Boateng. She's going to greet us in the name of the UNESCO and talk about the relationship between UNESCO and ANSO. Professor Oti Boateng, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to share my screen. Thank you very much. Greetings from UNESCO. It is our pleasure to be here, and we honor this opportunity to be here. I would like to thank the Hungarian Academy of Sciences for this partnership over the years, and also Chinese Academy and also ANSO. It is a pleasure to be here. The topic of today is more relevant to us now in UNESCO and global science than ever before. And I pitched this, my short presentation, as science and higher education, and how do we reduce the inequalities. And I say this because there is a wave going on globally. And the wave going on globally is that there is a new paradigm, and higher education have to seek that new paradigm. In this context of present planetary and socioeconomic challenges, sustainable and innovative solutions are required. And to have this, you need to be efficient, transparent, vibrant, and we need the scientific community, not only stemming from scientists, but the key now, as we discussed, is from higher education. And we have to link it to the society, which means that the imperatives of higher education now is more relevant than ever before. Because the future that we want, according to the Sustainable Development Goals, is that science is the future. And science has to be used to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. And higher education institutions have to be the drivers, in this. And that is why UNESCO is pursuing a new agenda of standard setting instrument, which is open science. And I think I take the opportunity to present this to you because this has just been approved for further, that the negotiation for the text has been approved by over 102 countries who were present in the intergovernmental category 2 meetings, which ended on the 12th of May, barely a fortnight ago. And what did they say? That in this interconnected and complex environmental and social and economic challenges, to be able to address issues of people, planet, we need to promote broad circulation of scientific knowledge. We need to enhance collaboration between scientists worldwide. And I'm pleased to appreciate the introduction of the first speaker and giving us the complexity and diversity of higher education. But we also need to create that link between science, policy, and society. We need to have a drive for international scientific cooperation. We have to make access to science to everybody, and people must benefit from science. And this is where higher education needs to reconfigure itself to take advantage of not only open science, but also the universal pressing needs, which require relevant teaching, learning, innovation, and standard setting in open science. This is just to say open science is a game changer. The Sustainable Development Goal is an opportunity, and higher education institutions must commit to open science to enhance access to scientific knowledge and innovation. And how are we doing it in UNESCO? How do we want higher education to do it? We acknowledge that the future of science is now, but it has to be timely, free to scientific data, publications, and information. It is also important for scientific collaboration and sharing of information at all levels. When I saw the map, which was shown earlier on, there's no diversity. I only saw one collaboration in Africa, many in Asia and Europe, 3 in Latin America, and Northern Europe. we need to bridge the gap. We need to bring everybody together. And I, look forward to higher education and, the scientific community to do that. The importance of science, policy, society, dialogue, and higher education leadership is very critical. We need to have the leaders in higher education who are the foresight, who are the vision to drive, higher education within the context of opening science to everybody, enhancing international collaboration in higher education so that we can bridge the knowledge gap. That is why, all 193 countries called UNESCO to do this. And we have pursued this. And I just said, the final draft of recommendation of open science is here. Please go online, look at it, read it, articulate it, and see how we can use this, in reshaping higher education globally. Just to give you a snapshot of the text, it's a preamble, aim and objective, recommendation, definition of open science core values and guiding principle and areas of action. I would only want to take two of them. The core values, and this is what, higher education and the new dynamics stand for. We need quality and integrity. We need diversity and inclusiveness. We need to have collective benefit, and we need to have equity and fairness. This is the core value of open science. It's also the core value of higher education. And the second area that I want to do, there are 7 areas of action. And I find higher education right at the core of all of it. And not to belabor the point, but I say higher education, needs to invest in open science infrastructures and services. We also need to invest in human resources, education, digital literacy, and capacity building. We have seen that the COVID, the countries that are left behind, or institution or community left behind, is because there is no digital literacy. So higher education, this is the way forward. And we also need to build those capacities. The other area which we also need to focus on is that we need to promote international and multi-stakeholder collaboration in view of reducing the digital divide. Bring it to, we have, as a collective community of practice of scientists looking forward to the proclamation of the International Year for Basic Science for Development. And this is where we all need to come together. And UNESCO is calling on you to be able to make this declaration realistic, relevant, and foresight. We can use this platform to be able to bring all the basic sciences together and also the higher education together. And doing that, it is to make sure that science is to the benefit of everybody. So thank you all very much. We call on you to join the Open Science Partnership. We call on you to join the Higher Education Institution Partnership. And we say the time is now to act. So from UNESCO, I would like to thank you very much for the opportunity to present this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for all the 3 introductory remarks that really were setting the agenda of today's webinar. Now we're moving to the 6 substantial core talks of the program of today. As you may have noticed in the program, the 6 talks are going to be followed by a 20-minute discussion period, but we're going to explain the technicalities of the discussion period later on. We sincerely hope that most of you can stay with us until the discussion period. Let me introduce the first speaker of this session, who is going to give us a general outline of the approach of education science to the research agenda. The speaker is Professor Gábor Halász. He's a doctor of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, professor of education at the Faculty of Pedagogy and Psychology of Eötvös Loránd University, Budapest, where he's the leader of a Center for Higher Education and Innovation Research and one of the programs of the doctoral school of education, which is teacher training and higher education studies. Professor Halász, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Professor Play. I'm going to share my screen. Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. In this very short presentation, I would like to give you a very brief summary of the policies and actions of the European Union in the field of higher education, research, and innovation. I shall focus on those aspects that might be particularly relevant in the context of this ANSO forum on fundamental science and higher education. First, I would like to say a few words about the evolution of higher education, research, and innovation policies in the European Union, with a special focus on research policy. And then I shall evoke the knowledge triangle model, which is guiding the design and implementation of higher education, research, and innovation policies in the EU. After this, I shall mention some of those recent key developments that seem to be the most relevant in the context of this ANSO forum. And finally, just a few words about the global and international dimension of the EU research policies. Oh, I'm sorry. So let me start with the evolution of science, innovation, and higher education policies of the European Union. I think that the most important thing is that during several decades, policies and actions were driven in this field by the idea of innovation-led growth and competitiveness. So this policy area has been very strongly connected with industrial policy. And a key element of that was to create linkages between the academic community and industry. But the change came after 2000, when the so-called Lisbon agenda was launched and the European research area was created. And this was signaling an increasing interest in basic research. So this has been happening since 2000. And an important part of this process was the launching of a new higher education policy in the European Union. This is what we call the higher education modernization agenda. And there have been many efforts to connect these two policy areas. Let me mention just one recent development in the higher education modernization agenda. This is the creation of so-called European universities, which might become an important way to support cross-border cooperation in fundamental research. I think this is one of those approaches which were mentioned by Professor Hudec at the beginning of this workshop. And this process has led to the increasing Europeanization of national research and higher education systems in Europe. So that was really a very brief presentation of the emergence of this policy field. And now let me come to the knowledge triangle model. The knowledge triangle is a kind of cognitive model. So this is a model which has a key role in orientating higher education, innovation and research policies in the European Union, including both the design and implementation of policies. It defines key players, actors, institutions, agencies, and it stimulates their cooperation to promote the knowledge economy and the knowledge society. So at the education pole, we have universities, which are conceived as a skills production, skills producing teaching institutions, typically supervised by national ministers of education. At the research pole, we have research institutes, universities, and they are conceived as research institutions, and typically these are supervised by ministers of research and technological development. And at the innovation pole, Sometimes this is also called the business pole. Economic or business organizations are found. Sometimes we also include some public service organizations, and these are typically supervised by ministers of economy or industry. And the cooperation of those actors, institutions, which can be found on these three poles, is seen as a fundamental condition of the promotion of the knowledge economy. And that happens not only at the level of the member state, but also at the level of the European Union, where different directorates within the European Commission are supervising those three areas. So I think that knowing about this model is a condition to understand the dynamics of research, innovation, and higher education policy in the European Union. And now let me come to the relevant key developments. I would mention three of them. The first one is the emergence of direct supranational funding of fundamental research. Well, there has been a tradition of funding research and innovation in the European Union in the framework of the so-called framework programs. Now they are called Horizon programs since the middle of the 80s. But in 2007, a totally new paradigm emerged when the European Research Council was created. So what are the most important elements of this new paradigm? First, that here the European Union is funding competing investigator-led research projects. So these are individuals or individual teams, which are supported, and not institutions and organizations. And the selection and funding is done directly by a supranational agency. And the selection of funded projects is based exclusively on excellence. So no political, no geographical considerations are taken into account. And there is a very strong emphasis on basic education, but here a new term is used. And I think that here it is important to stop for a moment, because in the European European Research Council discourse, the term frontier research is increasingly used instead of basic or fundamental research. And I think that the use of this term is perhaps blurring the classical distinction between basic and applied research. There is an abundant funding here between 2014 and 2020. 13 billion euros were planned for this kind of new funding model. And now the second key development that I would mention is the building of supranational institutions. I have already mentioned the European Research Council, which is one of those institutions. Another one which is a new one, the European Institute of Innovation and Technology, which was created just 1 year after the creation of the European Research Council. And I think that these are two different, in fact, competing institutions, supranational institutions. The European Research Council is mainly funding for fundamental or frontier research, while the European Institute of Innovation and Technology is supporting mainly industry-related research. It is, in fact, a kind of network-building organization. But besides these supranational institutions run directly by the European Commission, there is a very, very dense web of networks, communication platforms, partner organizations that can be observed in Europe. And among those, we can also see the networks of national academies of science. Let me just mention two of those networks. One is the European Federation of Academies of Sciences, and which is ALEA, which is for what we call policy for science. This is representing 50 academies from different countries, and they are supporting the recognition of science in Europe. And the other one is the European Academy's Science Advisory Council, which is doing what we sometimes call science for policy, using scientific advice for improving policy. I shall come back to that in a few moments. So that was the second key development I wanted to mention, supranational institution building. And the third one, which is very strongly connected with universities, is developing human resources for science, for research, namely the emergence of a new policy related with doctoral education in Europe. In this area, the doctoral education area, the European Commission is playing a kind of facilitating role. It is not directly coordinating things in this area, but it is facilitating the action of a number of different players. So that's why that's a very open and a multiplayer space, which is emerging now. Let me mention just a few key developments here. The first is that the European Union is increasingly using the outcomes of the non-EU process that we call the Bologna process. The second is the activation of powerful actors. This is what makes it possible to play this facilitating role. The most important is the European University Association, which now has a doctoral council, doctoral education council, which plays a very important role. And now doctorate is recognized often as a competence-based qualification. A new term is very often used, but the early stage researcher instead of doctoral students. We can see the emergence of European joint doctorates and also the involvement of non-academic partners. So that was the third new development I wanted to mention. And now let me come to the last one, which is using scientific knowledge for improving policy. Science for policy, as it is often called in the literature. Well, we have to know that the European Union has a very strong commitment towards evidence-informed policymaking. So we can see a very highly institutionalized practice of policy evaluation and impact assessment based on scientific research, and also a strong effort to build the knowledge basis of policymaking. But here we can observe a new development, and this is the scientific advice mechanism, which has been created to provide an opportunity for the science community to give policy advice to the European Commission in different key areas. And there are very interesting values, unfortunately, very interesting values accompanying that. Unfortunately, I do not have the time to go into the details, but let me just mention that one of the key organizations in this scientific advice mechanism, SAPEA, it is called SAPEA, recently under the Finnish presidency produced a number of kind of recommendations. And if we are looking at these recommendations, we can see that the key element of those is that science people should collaborate very strongly with other non-academic partners, the civil society partners, professional organizations. So I really recommend to look at these recommendations. You can see the source on the slide. Okay, and now let me finish this presentation by saying a few words about the global and international dimension of this emerging new research policy. Well, the European research area has always been a globally open space. For instance, we can see that within the governance structures of ERA, there is a strategic forum for international science and technology cooperation, which plays a very important role. And there are a number of examples of specific actions. For instance, the European Commission is supporting the development of science diplomacy skills and knowledge, or the collaboration and coordination capacities to coordinate research in the European Union and other so-called third countries, like, for instance, China. Well, this is what I could include in this very, very short presentation. So thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to mention that the written version of this presentation, which is much longer, has been made available for you on my personal website. The link is indicated here. Thank you again for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Halász, for this very educative outline of the map of changing research support and its relation to higher education and society at large in Europe. We are moving to another continent now. Our next speaker is going to be Professor Yan-Feng Wan, who is an ecologist and the Executive Vice President of the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. Professor Wang has also served as Vice Chairman of the Ecological Society of China since 2018 and the China Society of Natural Resources since 2019. And she's also a key player in the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development. Professor Wang will give a lecture on fusing research and education and innovative practice of the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. So the floor is yours, Professor Wang.
Thank you, Chair. Honorable Vice President Ferenc Hudek, Vice President Muhammad Yan, Director Peggy Oti Potten, dear friends, it has been a great honor to participate the ANSO conference and the Third International Science Forum on the Belt and the Road Initiative. We are generation facing the unprecedented global opportunities and challenges, such as globalization, the development of space technology, AI, genetic technology, and the internet have brought about huge impetus for economic growth. Potential threats of war, pollution, disease, like this year and the last year, the COVID-19, and the natural disasters are also looming. Against such a backdrop, it is urgent to cultivate talents in large numbers, students or young talents who are able to fully utilize the technological dividends to serve the common good of humanities. So these are the requirements. The new requirements for talent cultivation oriented toward the future are highlighted consequently. For example, in the year of 2015, UNESCO put forward the Strategic Mission for Education 2030. Education must deal with the problems caused by rapidly changing labor markets, technological advances, urbanization, migration, political instability, and also other issues we are facing. In the year of 2017, Knowledge Works Foundation underlined that the talents of future will pay more attention to core social emotional skills, basic cognitive and metacognitive practical skills. Similar goals were also prevalent among education programs set by national and international organizations and governments and universities around the world. Talents in the future should be equipped with 4 dimensions of ability. They are: first is intelligence, the second one is value and attitude, third one is social cognition, fourth around health and aesthetics. So in line with these new requirements, for future talent cultivation, university should reform the education model. That's the topic today I would like to share with you. In history, the expansion of university missions is closely related to scientific revolutions and industrial transformation. We can look back the four revolutions of science and transformation of industry. The classical European university used to aim simply at education, and this is the most basic mission of universities. The first scientific revolution marked by the emergence of Newtonian mechanics and the invention of steam engine promoted the creation of knowledge at universities. The university being founded by Humboldt in the year of 1809, introduced researches as a major function of a university. Humboldt believed that only scholars with excellent research ability could help students shape the spirit of dedication to the improvement and dissemination of science. By engaging students into research activities, the University of Berlin aspired to cultivate students' virtue of pursuing truth, help them master scientific principles, and improved their thinking and innovation abilities. Later on, in the year of 1876, German founded the first graduate school in the world at Johns Hopkins University, marking the fusion of research and education, and laid the foundation for modern universities. So the third mission of university is industry, which was identified during the second scientific revolution, marked by the invention of electric motor. This is natural because ultimate goal of education and research is to serve the society. With the third scientific revolution going on, modern universities of today are characterized by all three missions, namely the fusion of industry, education, and research, as mentioned by the former presentation also. So history has proved that university development is closely related to scientific progresses, industrial upgrades, and social changes. Today, in a world with unprecedentedly rapid science and technology advancement, development driven by innovation has become increasingly significant. In a strategic choice for all countries to cultivate more talents who are able to meet the challenges in the future. And this is a responsibility shouldered by universities. The fusion of research, education, and industry is the most effective way to cultivate the next generation of talents. We call them the talents in the future, or talents for the future. And now I would like to move on to the UCAS, the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences, the practice of this university of talent cultivation. As you might be aware, the Chinese Academy of Sciences is comprised of a comprehensive research and development network, a merit-based learning society, and a system of higher education. In the year of 1978, CAS founded the Graduate School of the University of Science and Technology of China. It was the first graduate school in the history of the People's Republic. In the year of 2000, it was renamed the Graduate School of Chinese Academy of Sciences. The graduate education programs in 104 research institutes at that time of CAS were unified into one system of enrollment educational administration, and degree awarding. In the year of 2012, the graduate school was renamed University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. In the year of 2014, UCAS enrolled the first cohort of undergraduate students. In the past 40 years since the year of 1978, UCAS has graduated more than 180,000 students, 137 of whom became CAS or Chinese Academy of Science or Chinese Academy of Engineering academicians, and about 1/4 of the country's outstanding young scientists. UCAS has a unique college system featuring fusion of research and education. Every college is hosted by one CAS institute of understanding research capabilities and supported by other several institutes of the same discipline. For example, the College of Physics is hosted by the Institute of Physics and supported by the Institute of Theoretical Physics, the Institute of Semiconductor, and the Institute of High Energy Physics. We have 41 of such colleges containing 349 departments. Deans and directors are leaders of the hosting institutes, CAS members, or renowned scientists. Supported nowadays by 116 CAS institutes, UCAS is headquartered in Beijing with 5 education centers in Shanghai, Wuhan, Guangzhou, Chengdu, and Lanzhou. UCAS has 4 campuses in Beijing, located at 4 districts of Beijing. With the feature of the fusion of research and education, UCAS is able to provide high-quality graduate education. We have top-notch scientists participating in teaching since the very beginning. Internationally renowned scientists such as T.D. Lee and Logan Hua all taught courses at UCAS at the earliest stage of this university. Today, we have a total number of 3,000 course instructors. The numbers of thesis supervisors reached 11,000, among which more than 6,000 are doctoral supervisors. The ratio of supervisor to students is about 1:4. All students have been able to carry out research practices on internationally advanced scientific platforms, such as BEPC and the marine research vessels. Between 2017 and 2020, UCAS graduate students passed lots of articles and as a first or co-first authors. And also we have an employment rate of over 95% and 80% of PhD graduates pursue R&D at their careers. The fusion of research and education also provides sufficient quality resources for the undergraduate student program. Every undergraduate student since entering this university, when they register in this university, is designated with one senior scientist as her academic tutor. In the first and second year, students take common core courses and have several opportunities to change to find their interest field. In the fourth year, they engage in real research at CAS labs and study abroad at overseas prestigious partner universities. The most important experience for us, if the students could find the star level couldn't find the right professors as their tutors or as their research field and follow the professors, they will have this opportunity and they could contact any of the professors in Chinese Academy of Sciences as their future advisors. UCAS academic ranking has been remarkable. The bi-monthly ESR update released in May of 2021 showed the UCAS ranks the 49th among global academic institutions and the first in China. That's the contribution both the scientists and the students who are engaged in research. Looking ahead, the new era has bestowed upon us new opportunities and missions. UCAS will implement the fusion of research and education and develop a path of collaborative innovation between higher education and scientific research. UCAS will realize deep integration and joint development with very comprehensive National Science Center, strive ahead in building a world-class university. And it is also opportunity for a university to be a neighbor of a comprehensive National Science Center. And our university will make indispensable contributions to the development of higher education and the cultivation of innovative talents in China, and to the progress of science and technology of mankind. So for this model, we think it's a time to combine, to get the bridge of higher education and innovation and research. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much for this very enlightening talk that showed us a new possibility for relationship between institutions of higher education and institutions of basic research. How can you form a university out of research institutions? That's a very challenging idea. I'm myself a cognitive psychologist, so I also enjoyed the first part of your talk where regarding the developmental profile of your students, you emphasize the analytic conceptions of modern cognitive psychology regarding student development. Our next speaker is going to be Professor Ivanka Popovic. She's recently the rector of the University of Belgrade near here, and also president of the Serbian Rectors Conference, and very active in different international cooperation relations, including ANSO also. As a researcher, her research interests are polymer science and in engineering as well as sustainable development. The title of her presentation is Fundamental Science, the Key Driver of Innovation. We are very eager to hear your presentation, Professor Popovic. The floor is yours, please.
Hello to everyone. Thank you very much for your kind invitation to speak at this conference. I am especially proud because the University of Belgrade is also a member of ANSO, which means that we are contributing to this very esteemed association of scientific institutions. The topic of my presentation is about fundamental research as the key driver for innovation. And we know now that universities are really faced with the mission impossible of providing all the necessary elements of social and economic development. I know that my own university, the University of Belgrade, which is a very large university servicing about 100,000 students, is also actually functioning at many levels. We are a comprehensive research university on the one hand. On the other hand, we are also a higher education institution serving the purposes of mass higher education. And considering developments on a global level, we're also trying to position ourselves as an entrepreneurial university. All of these things require very many conditions to be fulfilled, which is not at all easy. Which brings us back to the core of the issue, and that is how to maintain fundamental science and how to show the relevance of fundamental science, that everything that can be built upon the results of fundamental science. I would just like to mention COVID-19, as I think we all must in these times, that actually COVID-19 can help our case, because the vaccines that were developed in a rather short time to combat COVID-19 were based on decades of fundamental biomedical research, actually proving the point that fundamental research, although not maybe visible at the first instance, is the key to a continuous development in a knowledge-based society. And so what are the challenges we are facing to develop knowledge-based societies? Knowledge-based societies for economic development, surely, but many times we see that this economic development is built more on optimizations than they are really on the benefits of fundamental science. And especially many politicians or institutions of government are looking for fast solutions in the respect that they want science to give a very quick, immediate response to the needs of certain parts of the economy. This is not at all easy to achieve. As we look now at the funding possibilities that exist for scientific institutions, primarily universities and institutes of various scopes, we see the key points are national funding, but there are many aspects of national funding, of international funding, that are also very attractive. And if we look at the various open calls that we all look at a regular basis, we can see that these calls are no more openly focused on fundamental science and research. We see that multi and interdisciplinarity have come the norm in all of these discussions and calls, asking for scientists from various fields to integrate and to provide a certain synergy. In this respect, when we talk about multidisciplinarity, are we saying that multidisciplinarity is a way of simulating nature, which is an interdisciplinary affair? Or are we trying to pull or push the focus of funded science more in an applied way? This is, I think, an open debate, and one where we can participate in, but the final say is always with the ones who have the money. So the funding institutions will be those that will decide actually based on recommendations what will be the focus of the science. And this brings us to the next, let's say, pragmatic part of this discussion, and that is the discussion about technology readiness levels. I think all of us that are engaged in various types of research know that fundamental science is engaged more at the technology readiness levels, the TRLs of 1 to 3. We know that there are 9 of these levels, and that the first 3 levels are somehow appointed to fundamental science. The last 3 are definitely designated for applied science and commercialization. And then we have the issue of those 3 that are in the middle. And that's where the most difficult funding actually opportunities arise. It's almost very difficult to get this funding. And this is where we have the massive valley of death of many good ideas based on solid fundamental research that never come to light because of the lack of funding, and especially countries with less means for financing find it almost impossible for researchers to, even at the level of a few $1,000 or euros, make the next step forward to innovation that could lead to commercialization. So this is, I think, a very large challenge that is, I don't mean to make this discussion vulgar, but it brings us to the issue of the funding as the key point, because I think the investment in human resources, which all countries engage in through the funding of universities and the engagement of universities, and also the additional education of human resources in excellent scientific institution, lead us to the situation where a university is basing its performance on the availability of national funding schemes and international funding. We know that international funding is extremely competitive. The passing rate is very low, often below 10%. So in these types of circumstances, it's very difficult to talk about a global advancement of fundamental research in this way. If we look at the national situation in many countries, we have to talk about the direct investment of governments through the percent of GDP. The discussions always talk about the ideal situation that 3% of the GDP is invested in all kinds of research. This would provide the necessary growth at all national levels to achieve the scientific excellence we would like, and which would allow also for, I think, investment in the equipment that is needed for this. What is the reality? The reality is that in most countries, we are talking about struggling lobbying effects to have this type of investment to the level of 1.5% of the GDP. And also how to engage commercial ventures. How do companies, where are they willing to step in? Companies are also willing to deal with scientific results that are going at the level of the higher TRLs. And this is again where fundamental science is missing out. And as I said, not trying to be negative about this whole context, but we have to talk about the motivation of scientists to be engaged in fundamental research. Besides the enthusiasm that always exists among a certain group of researchers, and especially the young ones, we have to talk about the challenges that exist, because if we are talking about fundamental research that can provide incentives for innovation, it means that the results of this research need to be protected properly by certain intellectual property ownership arrangements. And as you know, really many world-known universities have become famous, have scientific institutions by some of the results that have led, for example, to the development of contact lenses or certain types of medication. This has not only made these scientific institutions famous, but also has brought them a pretty penny in terms of possible investment in further research. The question is, how does this arrangement for the scientific institution and university motivate the scientist? As we know, initially, the owners of the intellectual property don't necessarily need to be the scientists. And this is very often the situation in poor countries, or let's say countries and universities with less financial possibilities. A valuable research result can be only taken to a certain level, and at one point will be sold to either another scientific institution or to a company that can finance the protection of this individual property and its further development. How does this incentivize the scientist? okay, there will be some compensation for this scientist or this team, but on the other hand, there can also be a relevant aspect in the person's CV. But all in all, I'm saying that we have a very serious issue of how to sufficiently motivate scientists to move forward in research that could potentially lead to innovation. In this respect, when we make a conclusion about what we are talking about, I would say that the efforts that we are putting into fundamental science are not being successfully pitched to politicians and who are not fully understanding the need for long-term investment in, first of all, developing top-notch scientific personnel and experts, so the human resource aspect of the job. The second, investing in the infrastructure that can assist these researchers to achieve their and also the commercialization. So I fully commend the efforts of the European Union on how the European research area is being developed. And as was mentioned by a previous speaker, the knowledge triangle in other large countries, this can be at a level. But all in all, I think we are still a long way away from achieving this strategy to economic and social progress and allowing it to be the key driver for innovation. So I hope that we as a scientific community will have the strength to lobby each of us at our national level to attain this position of fundamental research and not let it be pushed aside for the needs of some short-term applied research, which is of course necessary, but this cannot be the major driving force for long-term knowledge-based development of a country and of our planet as a whole. And with these words, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Popovic, for this contribution to our discussion. Several speakers have already mentioned that the future of research and the future of higher education depends on how we can embed it into larger issues of society. And several speakers also raised the issue of the responsibility of governments. Our next speaker is a key player in this regard. Professor Erhar Bhushan recently is chairman of the Institute for the Danube region in Central Europe, but as we all know, his previous positions had been Vice Chancellor of the government of Austria, ministerial positions such as Minister of Science and Research, Minister of Education, and so on. Professor Bhushan is going to talk on strategy and developing fundamental science and higher education in newly funded states in the Western Balkans. Professor Bhushan, the floor is yours.
Köszönöm szépen, Professor Halács. I'm quite pleased, I think, to be here on the board, but my capacity is not fundamentally covering fundamental science. I think I'm only one who was involved to develop the systems concerning in the political changes we had. I had here some specific experiences. Why I was eager to speak about is the fact that we have now developed a system where a division of East-West is not anymore existing. We are getting some other divisions, but this is not the subject of today. But there's still some remains out of the past difficulties, and we have to work on this, I think, to overcome this. That's the reason why I'm quite happy to speak about these, especially after Professor Popovic, from the Daniel Practice Conference. Professor Popovic, I may tell you, I'm one of the co-founders years ago that this institution is existing, and I'm quite happy that it is moving in the right direction, because in the Danube Basin, we have still to do a lot for better cooperation, that the things are proceeding, because it has a great importance for Europe in the context of globalization. But this is not the subject. I was speaking about the division between East and West, and this had an impact, I think, on the world of the universities on both sides. May I say, in a very primitive way, on fundamental science, the universities in the former communist system have been partly very excellent, because I think it was a precondition for natural science, for techniques, also a question sometimes of military developments, and so on and so on. Just for example, if you are looking to Ukraine, what is here left by the university system, especially on metallurgical things and so on, is really outstanding. And it had some importance for the heavy industry, partly, may I say, also on the weapons industry here for sure. It's not blaming here the former Soviet Union producing weapons, because the other have done it and are doing it exactly nowadays, because it's one of the developments which concerns me very much. We are developing now weapons, and we are producing weapons so much as we never did. This is also a danger for peace. But this is another subject, and not the subject of our conference. So far, by the downfall of the political systems, for example, in former Yugoslavia, in East Central Europe, by the split of the Soviet Union in a rich landscape of newly built states, I think we have got other conditions for the university system in general, but also for some specific areas like fundamental science and so on and so on. And I think this is a very important subject because nobody can guarantee that it might happen, that the maps on the world are changing again in such a deep and impressive way as it has happened. It has happened with the downfall of the Soviet Union. I think it's a really new landscape, a new map which is existing. And it has happened in the neighborhood of my home country, Austria, by the downfall of Yugoslavia. So far, I think there it was a challenge for all these countries to develop the right system to handle all these things. In general, allow me to say there is a progress. There's sometimes always a very bad pessimism. It has not developed so good, and we have the problems, and so on and so on. No, that's not true. But what we have to consider, it is comparatively easy, comparatively, not really easy to change political systems, but to change university systems is even more complicated. Needs a lot of time, and so on and so on. I think you have to consider it's a quite primitive view, which I'm doing now. I think there's a problem that concerning the university system and in general education, I think it needs a change of generations and new experiences. And that's not easy from one day to the other. Here, I think you cannot switch something and saying, now we are another system. I think it needs for sure some time to prepare it. It needs a lot of money, and it needs especially trained staff following the new conditions which are existing. And we are still amidst this process. I have some experiences because especially in the Balkans, or as we are saying in Southeast Europe, we have still to follow this, and there are a lot of efforts necessary, I think, to continue in the right way. But it is moving step by step. And I only want to mention some specific problems which for sure are existing. First of all, I think there must be a catch-up between East and West to get common standards. That needs sometimes a change of the staff, that needs another training, and so on, which partly has happened, but it has also some other sides. This is the brain drain. The brain drain in the directions that really good educated people are going where they can earn more money and where they have more possibility to develop their research and so on. That has happened. It was partly going in one direction, primitively say in the Western direction, but also I think I can see that in some directions it's going also in the other direction. The reason has an economic background because for the industrial companies which are depending on fundamental science, there are new possibilities in the different countries. You have extreme changes. I give you one example, Slovakia. In Slovakia, I think there was a huge development in the Czechoslovak time on weapons industry. Slovakia was the place where the Czechoslovakia produced weapons and exported in different directions. Nowadays, it is of great importance for the car industry. I think it is totally changed, and I think the Slovaks have been clever enough, I think, to change it in the right direction. And it had a straight impact on the university system in general. It's only one example is existing, but I want to line it out as one of the examples. You had also other developments which are a little bit more complicated. It's depending if countries are building up their government and their education system newly. It is a problem that also, especially from the Western side, here mainly the Americans were jumping in with private universities. I think I have one outstanding example, that's Kosovo. You have here a huge number of private universities where some people, where I have some doubts that they are the right, are trying to earn extreme money on this subject, because to have a doctorate on the visit card plays an important role. And I have my doubts, and we tried also to do some research on this. Maybe the quality is not really existing. That's also one of the problems here existing. Here you can see also the background of the legislation has a great importance. The background of financing has a great importance. The subject of quality control plays also a very important role, and so on and so on. Maybe it's better in fundamental science because at the end of the day, philosophical or ideological system cannot decide that 1 + 1 is not 2. So far, I think there were concerning here in this question a better basis. The real problem was for the humanist, for the humanities, because here ideological questions play quite more a great role. And I think it's not really yet done. It's still existing because it's also depending on the education of new staff and so on and so on. I'm only telling you in the connection with the Erste Foundation and the Institute of the Humanities, we are doing a Center for Advanced Studies in Rijeka, I think, to build up more university staff, especially in the humanities, but also on sociology and so on and so on. That's not an easy job, I think, to do it, but we have to do it to gain more quality. I think here you can see where the difficulties are existing in building up a university system. I was speaking about brain drain. There's for sure also a brain drain in different directions. That's a brain drain of those, especially students, leaving their home country and going to Western universities. I'm a teacher at the University of Graz, that's southwest from Vienna, and I think my students are a third coming from Balkan states and East Central European states. And I think mainly they are staying or going in other formerly Western countries, but they are missed in their own countries. I think this is a great question. I think especially a question for the European Union and further on also for these countries who are not yet members of the European Union. I think we have a lot of discussions about enlargement of the European Union, but nothing is happening. And they're very critical on my beloved member states of the European Union because they are not really proceeding in this subject. I'm a fan not to speak about the European Union. We have to speak about whole Europe together. And I think this is a real challenge we have in reality. I think this kind of mobility is still existing because a main part of the former Western countries are really able to invest quite more money here in research, invest more money in universities, and so on and so on. And so far, this brain drain is for sure existing. It's extremely helpful for these countries and for the university systems there, but it is not very good for the other countries. I'm quite happy that the European Union is doing Erasmus Mundus and some other programs, but it is not covering all the problems. Maybe that we are getting a challenge by some developments we have not foreseen. What did we not foresee? COVID-19. I think here some new ways of cooperation concerning vaccination and so on here existing. Again, a kind of nationalistic thinking is coming up if some borders are closed in exchange for vaccines and so on. But this we have to overcome. And I'm asking the universities heavily to criticize these wrong tendencies here because it's not very helpful for the future of Europe. Another point which we have to do is the fact that we need more European and for sure international cooperation. The European Union was building up some institutes. Currently, European Medical Association agency is quite often seen, but there are also a lot of others, meteorological institute and. It is for sure a long list. To be critical, I think we have no real strategy on this subject. I'm a fan of European integration into the European Union, but I may tell you, here I'm very critical. I think the commissioner who has the smallest budget is a commissioner for culture. For me, Europe is culture. Therefore, I think there's more money necessary there. The next lower budget is for education. And that's also for sure a mistake. Here we need more cooperative institutes. We need more common regulation. We need even a legislation which is covering the difficulties in this direction. And if we are all speaking constantly about ecology and so on, I think this will not work if we are not getting common regulations. And I think in this direction we have to move, and we need a stronger exchange on the experience of the different universities in the different countries, but also a stronger cooperation, I think, to get regulations and to get ways to be closer together. I think these were only some points I wanted to mention on this subject, because for me, it is extremely important for politics and extremely important for science that we are learning out of the experiences. And I think these changes of the map in Southeast Europe, in East Central Europe, by the downfall of the Soviet Union, is an experience out of which we have to learn. And we have now, by the pandemic, also a kind of experience out of which we have to learn. And I think if an institution has to be, to do the lead in experience exchange, in research, what is necessary, and so these are the universities, because they are not the national institutions, they are common institutions. I think the universities were in the past common in Europe, with a common way of teaching and so on and so on, that went down by the nation state and so on and so on. But I think we have to do it also in the future because we have common challenges here in the world, I think, to handle this world, that we are living in a better world. So far, a short overview from my side on this scene. And I have to say many thanks to you that you are so patient to listen to me. Many thanks. Köszönöm szépen.
Thank you, Professor Busek, for this very exceptional and very challenging lecture. Now let's move on to our next Chinese speaker. The next presenter is going to be Professor Chen. He's the Vice President in charge of International Affairs at Fudan University, Shanghai. As a researcher, he's a political scientist and a researcher of international cooperation and diplomatic relations. He has been visiting many American and Western European universities in his role as a scientist. He will give a presentation on a topic which is very sensitive recently in Hungary, on the establishment of Fudan Hungary University in Budapest. Professor Chen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And also dear colleagues and friends from the ANSO and the Hungarian Academy of Science, the Chinese Academy of Science, and all the participating institutions. I thank you very much for the invitation to speak at this forum. To begin with, I have to say that, I'm actually leading a national sub-association of Belt and Road International Educational Exchange under the Chinese National Association of International Education Exchange. So this newly created sub-association now has already 90 member universities and vocational colleges and basic education schools in China who are very interested in developing relationship with the universities and educational institutions along the Belt and Road. So I would like to take this opportunity to express our interest and willingness to working with all the participation institutions, particularly to promote further collaborations among the Chinese institutions and the institutions on the Belt and Road. Some words about my university. Fudan University is a comprehensive national university. As we had 4 campuses now currently in Shanghai, China. Roughly, we had 40,000 students. 2/3 of them actually are graduate students. We had 3,100 faculty members and 17 affiliate hospitals. 2 of them actually are the top 10 hospitals in China. They play a very great central role in combating the COVID-19 in Shanghai, which keep the Shanghai the safest city during this pandemic, I think worldwide among the big cities. This is a university which covers all the 5 core areas, right? Humanities, social sciences, natural science, engineering, and medical science. According to the recent QS top university ranking, we are one of the 2 Chinese universities in the mainland of China that all its 5 areas has been in the top 50 globally. So we are very glad that this is very balanced development of the university, but also creates a lot of opportunities for us for fusion right, for conducting interdisciplinary studies, and which is a major area that we are putting. With many Chinese universities, Fudan aims to build itself a world-class university. It aims to facilitate, definitely as a Chinese university, the further development of China, but also to contribute to the human progress around the world. Therefore, we are in the process of prioritizing our research around the 17, Sustainable Development Goals. We look at all the publication record. We are doing very good in like 12 or 13 areas of the 17 SDG goals. But with more strategically design and direction that we would concentrate, put more emphasis in the research with the SDG-oriented direction. At the same time, we are also giving bigger priorities to development new partnership in the global south and in the countries around the Belt and Road, with some new initiatives like the Fudan Latin American University Consortium, the FLOC, the Lantau Mekong University Network, and we are in a way leading the BRICS University League, etc. So again, this background, the Fudan University started to build some collaborative partnerships with our Hungarian partners, like our Chinese department, the School of Philosophy, developed a relationship with Roland University, the School of Economics, and my own School of International Studies has been working with the Corvinus University, and our faculty of anthropology, biology, and material science has been working with other Hungarian institutions. In year 2016, the Central Bank of Hungary start to send some of its staff to our training programs in our School of Economics. Since then, we have been developing a quite area of collaborations. We also jointly sponsor workshops in the Shanghai Forum, the big international forum we organized by Fudan. And we also organize joint workshops in the Euro-Asian Forum, organized in Budapest by the Central Bank of Hungary. With all this, kind of support, we start with the Corvinus University double degree master programs in finance. 3 batches of students already in the program, and we're going to see the graduates from this semester. This is quite interesting because this is a very special program because it's not like a normal double degree program. You spend 1 year in your own university and spend another year in a foreign university. This is a program we delivered mostly in Hungary, which become possible because the Chinese government lifted its regulation about overseas teaching, I think 7 years ago. So now the Chinese university can go abroad to offer degrees in other countries, offering Chinese degree. But we also get accreditation from the Hungarian government that we can do this in Hungary. So this initial collaborations leads to a bigger idea that whether we can build a Fudan campus in Budapest. Certainly, we got quite strong support from the government of Hungary. And in December 2019, Minister Laszlo, during his visit to Shanghai, we signed a memorandum of understanding of intent, generally expressed the common wish that we are planning to build a future campus in Budapest. It's only general ideas. We were slowed down a bit by the pandemic. But eventually, with the support from the government of Hungary, and certainly also the encouragement from President Xi Jinping in his speech in early February in the China Central Eastern countries annual summit, we have finally signed agreement, a strategic cooperation agreement with the government of Hungary, represented by the Minister for Innovation and Technology, Mr. Laszlo. So according to this agreement, we are going to create a new entity in the Budapest called Food and Hungary University. Food and Hungary University will be a new university, an independent university, to be established under Hungarian law and be registered in Hungary as a Hungarian university, able to offer the Hungarian degrees. It would be governed by its own charter, as we think. It will be located in the eastern banks of the Danube River, south of the Budapest. There were facilities will be built for use for the Food and Hungary University. The Food and Hungary University plans to build like 4 faculties, 4 schools: the schools of humanities and social sciences, the School of Science and Engineering, the School of Public and Business Management, and the School of Medical Science. We would start to have undergraduate and graduate programs that will meet the needs of the Hungary and wider Europe. We will initially focus on like culture and history studies, economics, finance, international studies, global governance, pharmacy and medicine, artificial intelligence, mathematics and data science, new media, and etc. The Food and Hungary University will also aim to set up a series of innovative research institutions to carry out scientific research in related disciplines and promote scientific and technological innovation and technological transformation. So in a way to inject new dynamism in the Hungarian economy. As we envisage that at the end of it, we will have 6,000 students, some Hungarians, but also international students, and also 500 to 600 faculty and staff members. We certainly will try to recruit, globally, the good professors coming to Hungary, so that it could, make the newly created institution a globally competitive one. To work with the Hungarian government to build up this Food and Hungary University of this size is certainly a historical step for my university in its 116 years history. And also, I think that it would be very big development for China's higher education, because as far as I know that one Chinese university built up a very big campus in Malaysia, but this one will be the second one, the biggest one, and this will be in Europe. That's the only one in Europe. We are trying to build it as an international platform for teaching, research, and innovative cooperation with leading Hungarian universities and research institutions, and also our partner universities, institutions in wider Europe. So I think this will be the beginning of a major endeavor for us to deepen our collaborations with all the distinguished prestigious universities and research institutions in Hungary. We are really looking forward to this new project, and we also will see all the possible ways to work with our partners in Hungary. Thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you, Vice Rector and Professor Chen, for this very informative presentation, very informative for the Hungarians in the conference as well. Our last speaker before the general discussion is going to be Professor Alexei Kokhlov. Professor Kokhlov is Vice President of ANSO and also Vice President of the Russian Academy of Sciences. As several of the speakers today already, he's a well-established physicist and works in the field of physical chemistry and polymer gels and in general computer modeling of polymer systems. So probably his research work is well known to several of the panelists today. Professor Kokhlov, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, my presentation will deal with the issue of interaction of universities and research institutes as a key element of education of young researchers in Russia. Actually, we all understand that training of young researchers is really a key challenge for any country of the world. And the modern generation of young scientists will form future professional community at national and world level. Actually, they will ensure the scientific and technological development and future of the human civilization. In Russia, we have some specific features of in the training of young researchers. And I would say that the main specific feature is that normally the education of young researchers takes place in the process of interaction of research institutes of Russian Academy of Sciences, universities, and other organizations. And another key feature is that in Russia, since the 19th century, we are dedicated to the ideas of continuous training and support of young scientists, starting from the very low level of education, actually from the high school. The landscape of Russian science can be seen in this slide. Actually, we have about 350,000 scientists in Russia, and they are working in different places. There are more than 1,500 research institutions or scientific centers, more than 900 universities, about 450 industrial scientific centers and 250 engineering centers. And in all these centers, scientists are actively working. These are rather qualified scientists. Actually, from the total amount of 350 scientists, about 30% of researchers have a scientific degree. So actually 27 to 20% are candidates of sciences. This is a Russian equivalent of PhD. And 7% are doctor of sciences. This is much higher level of scientific degree, somewhat analogous to German habilitation. The age structure of Russian science is more or less homogeneously distributed over the ages, but there is a peak between the ages of 30 and 39. This is a very good situation. Actually, in our case, more than 27% of scientists are between these ages. These are those who started to come to science in the first decade of this century. Actually, just below the age of 29, it is only 17% of young scientists. In the elder, more old generations, more or less uniform distribution. And actually, this is a problem now. We have to just ensure that these scientists between the ages of 30 and 39, who are already rather qualified, receive their own laboratory, those of them who can lead the scientific work of the others. And also, I would like to mention that in principle for Russia, the issue of training of young scientists is very important. And there are various opportunities and resources used for this. I will give you some examples. Actually, the basic leading principle of training in Russia, this comes from the times after the end of the Second World War, is that a model of training through research work. Actually, this model was first implemented in Russia, in Russian Empire, even in the 19th century. It comes from Germany and from the Humboldt principle of, of education through research work. The research work of students is regarded as a continuation and deepening of the educational process. And also, by the way, in this way, the relationship between fundamental and applied education, which is one of the key issues of the today discussion, is also resolved because, well, theoretical fundamental education is given by the general courses, and applied education comes through the training in the course of the specific research work. Normally in our country, leading scientists are directly involved in supervising students, supervising their term reports, theses, and internships at high-tech enterprises. And students conduct research under the guidance of scientists participate in the work of research laboratories and carry out research and technical projects. One example, for example, from this summer, from the forthcoming summer, we have the so-called culture of floating universities, where the research vessels are serving in summer season as a base for the practice of the students who are involved in the earth sciences. And actually this summer, 2 floating universities will go to the Arctic on Russian research vessels, one from my university, Lomonosov Moscow State University, and another one from the joint team of Moscow University of Physics and Technology, the famous FISTECH, and the Institute of Oceanology of Russian Academy of Sciences. And a significant part of the team of the research crew will be bachelor students, master students, and graduate students. And during the summer expeditions, all the students will be provided with the opportunity to find scientific advisor, because, experienced scientists will also travel at these research vessels. they will start the whole cycle of research work from setting a problem through collecting and processing data to publishing and presenting scientific results. Another example is the so-called FISTEC system, which was first started in Moscow Physico-Technical Institute. Now it's University of Physics and Technology in 1948, and since that it developed, and well, the results are quite remarkable for the graduates of those who finished FISTEC. Well, actually, the idea is that, well, this is very similar to what was described by Professor Jan van Bon, when she described the University of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. The model is that gifted students carry out research projects under the guidance of well-known scientists, and students are really gifted that the competition is about 10 applications for one place. Students obtain profound fundamental physics and mathematical education, and at the same time, starting from the first year of study, students are involved in scientific work in the leading research laboratories. And really this gives very good results, enough to say that the graduates of FISTEC, for example, Novoselov and Game, they obtained recently, quite about 10 years ago, the Nobel Prize for the discovery of graphene. Another just more common practice is the so-called basic chairs. This is also similar to what was described at the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences. Well, a given institution, a leading research institution, creates the so-called basic chair at the university. And through this basic chair, the connection between the university, where the general fundamental education is given, and the Institute of the Academy of Sciences, where the research is implemented, is established. So the connection between these two educational and research entities. Well, this is a very common practice. It is now practically all universities and all research and all research institutes have this type of connection. For example, as an example, I have, for example, shown here, I have chosen to show some basic chairs at the National Research Nuclear University, MIFI. They have, for example, the Rosatom Atomic Energy Corporation have established the basic chair, the Department of Closed Nuclear Fuel Cycle Technologies at this university. This university actually is just atomic energy university, basic atomic energy university in Russia for the atomic power stations, etc. There is a basic chair of State Research Institute Luch, also of Rosatom, Department of Physical Problems of Material Sciences. Research Institute Polus has established in this university Department of Semiconductor Quantum Electronics. And in all the three examples, the students are provided not only with the basic education in physics and mathematics, but also by the training and real research work in the applied institutions. All these institutions are applied institutions. They are not fundamental institutions of Russian Academy of Sciences. And we expect that this trend will be strengthened in the future, because just a few days ago, the so-called Priority 2030 program for the Russian universities was launched. And actually in this program, at least 100 Russian universities will participate. And the basic principle is to promote the collaboration the consortia between the universities on the one hand and research organizations and high-tech companies on the other hand. So this is not just the general education, but education aimed to the aim is that the graduates go directly working to the research institutes and companies who are helping in the education. And finally, I would like to say that I also already mentioned that we now have many researchers in the age between 30 and 39, and most successful of these researchers definitely have to just establish their own laboratories, not working in the laboratories of their scientific supervisor, but to establish their own laboratories. And to help this within the framework of the Science National Project, it is planned that this year will be created 100 new laboratories of which will be headed by those scientists no older than 39 years old. And in general, this program is called 1,000 laboratories. 200 laboratories was already created since 2018. And in general, we are planning to have 1,000 new laboratories funded from the state budget. And the aim is that the age of at least 70% of the total laboratory staff should also be less than 36 years. And finally, I would like to say that there is a continuous follow-up for the young scientists who are just graduating from the universities. And normally, after PhD studies, they obtain PhD. There is a rather developed system of federal grants and scholarship, which are available only for those who already have PhD, but still are younger than 35 years old. And actually, using these grants, those people, young scientists, they are accumulating experience, and hopefully when they reach the limit of 35 years, between 35 and 39, they already can establish their own research laboratory and accept to this laboratory more young scientists. This is the current situation in Russia, following the topic of today's discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Koklov, for this very challenging talk, especially about the possibilities of young researchers. Now, as our original program suggests, we move over to the panel discussion. I would ask our facilitator, Mr. Byrne, to explain how we imagine the panel discussion.
Thank you. Indeed, we will continue now with a 20-minute panel discussion with the participation of the speakers of today. The panel will be chaired by Professor Play, who has prepared 5 questions, which he will share with us in a minute. He will introduce them one by one and ask the panelists to make their comments. There is no specific rule on who will get the floor first. So if you would like to intervene or add to the discussion, we kindly ask you to use the raise hand button in the Zoom application, or simply raise your hand so that we can see it in the video. As I mentioned, we have 20 minutes for the panel discussion, so please formulate your comments in a way that allows us to keep the timeline set for this part of the program. And of course, beyond the speakers of today, all members of the panel who are present in the Zoom are invited to contribute to the discussion. And now I invite Professor Play to start the discussion.
Thank you very much. I would also elaborate that Mr. Byrne and his associates will help me identifying those who are wishing to contribute if I don't see the raised hands and so on. So the first issue, can you show the slide for this? No, okay, so the first, we don't need to. So the first issue, I was sort of summarizing possible discussion issues as 5 proposals, but we can have as many as you want and talk about other things. The first issue is the decision relations and hierarchy of owners, academic leaders, and managers. That relates to issues like the one mentioned by Professor Bhushan about the West Balkan developments of private universities and so on, or the entire issue of what's the relationship owners in most of the European situation and in many of the other countries present in these discussions. Owners are basically the state somehow or some governmental agency, and then the academic leaders and managers. Who is giving the strategies and who is directing the move of the institutions of research and higher education? That's what I have in mind. Gabor Halász, please.
Thank you. Perhaps I could contribute to the debate on this question, evoking my personal experience in the framework of the Erasmus Mundus program, which is about training future leaders, managers in higher education and research. Its name is Maria. In this program, we are trying to develop the skills of our students for all the 3 roles you mentioned in your question. And during the training, we put them into those roles. So they have to play role games. So sometimes they have to play the role of the owner. Sometimes they have to play the role of the academic leader. Sometimes the role of the manager. But there are other roles, not only these 3 roles. For instance, external partners, companies or civil organizations. And this is showing me that it is possible to develop a kind of thinking, a kind of talking, which makes it possible that these 3 poles can communicate well with each other. So I think that that's a quite interesting share of responsibilities, of tasks between these roles, and they do not necessarily, they are not necessarily in conflict. So it's possible to have a common language, which makes it possible to people to go from one role to another one. That's my contribution. Thank
you. A very challenging educative aspect of the whole role relations issue. Any other comments or questions or issues regarding this possible topic? Well, we don't. Ciao. Yeah. Ciao, please.
All the speakers and all the chairs. So we have a facilitator and a preceding chair. But anyway, I do want to express my deep appreciation, to all the wonderful presentations and points. But today is a little special in the sense that I just read a Nature article. Today is May the 27th. It says, protect scientific collaboration from geopolitics. Well, no, these topics is changing science education policy landscape. I guess this is probably the biggest rivalry between China and other countries to diminish global scientific collaboration just when it is most needed. We have to jointly, unify the forces to fight the pandemic. But, I just raised the issue that it's such a coincidence. And perhaps the speakers deliberately avoid to mention this point, but so in China, and I worked in the international collaboration field about 40 years. And that is really the biggest changing landscape for me, for science and international collaboration and education. I just reached that point.
That science article, or Nature article, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, any other contributions to this issue? We can move on to the next issue, which many of the speakers today mentioned financing issues. And I would, you see on this little slide, the second issue is there any role of private capital in fundamental science, and what's the relationship between, it's usually state investment, or in Europe, like the ERC, Gábor Halász was presenting in detail, it's sort of over the national level, but it's still like a state investment. Is there any possible role of private capital in fundamental science and its implementation in higher education?
Ivanka Popovic.
Ivanka Popovic. Okay, yeah, Professor Ivanka Popovic.
So thank you. I think this is a very good question that you're posing, because I think what we are facing now is a transition, that what was usually the bastion of more or less state-financed research, especially in the area of fundamental research. I think we are seeing some changes, and that some large investors are realizing the importance of financing also fundamental research. And I would just like to mention one example, as that now in Denmark, we are seeing that the most relevant funders of high-level research and excellent research are actually commercial or private research funding systems. So I would just like to mention that this is not a possibility, it's something that really is already a reality, and I think this model might take on in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Professor Bhushan.
I think this is a very important question, but I think we have to enlarge the perspective, because I think in specific areas of business, we are getting tremendous changes. If I'm looking if we are looking to trade companies and so on, I think there are global chains existing. On the media, you are getting for sure also some global developments. And as far as I'm looking, and to my Chinese friends, I'm asking for forgiveness, but also the huge investment by your program concerning this BELT program. I think you are getting a huge influence where the money shall go concerning science and research. I think we have no real international control on this. It is still the nation state, mainly a little bit the European Union, and for sure bigger countries like the United States, China, and so on, are influencing it where it is. But I think it is not really a system where we have the overview where the money is going, and we have, at the end, no control where the money is going. And I think this will be a big problem, especially for smaller countries, but in general also politically. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's you really realized the challenging sort of hidden dimensions of this issue. Yeah, any further comments and questions? Yeah, Professor Hudes here.
Thank you very much. I have just a very short comment on this. There is a classification system that research can be classified as curiosity-driven and mission-driven type. And it is my understanding that perhaps the curiosity-driven research projects should be financed by common society-defined sources, and frequently this is the government or the government-controlled funding agencies. And the mission-driven kind of research is very much more close to the heart of the private industries producing some sort of product which can have some sort of profit. So it's maybe it is a too much simplified picture, but perhaps we should work on this. Getting the idea that the government or state agency sponsored research should be very much focusing on the curiosity-driven problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Kwasin Jan raises a question, and also Professor Chen and Professor Halas in this order. Yeah.
May I please? I would like to discuss a little bit about the private university system. We have a large number of private universities in Pakistan. On surface, all the universities should conform to the standards established by the Higher Education Commission of Pakistan. The Higher Education Commission actually has a vast agenda, and the major part of that is that they establish minimum standard that all the universities should conform to that. Nevertheless, we have a distinct division of these private universities. A few are excellent, many are mediocre. That is probably because internal control is lacking and there is a big element of finances than the real load for promotion of education and science. And I was wondering whether what is the situation in some of the European states where there are private universities? Thank you.
Thank you. Of course, we are not in a panel discussion situation where anyone can reply to the issues. So we are raising issues rather than doing a question answering. So the next contributor is Professor Chen.
Yeah, regarding this issue, I think the government certainly should have the primary responsibility in supporting the basic science. I think in China that this is particularly the case because now we move up the technological development into the new stage. Particularly now we need to have more indigenous innovations, inventions. So you need bigger investment in the basic science. But however, the government investment is always not enough, you know. So we need the private sector for various reasons to also contribute. So we now see some bigger companies, for their own scientific development purpose, they are investing in the universities. But certainly also some of the alumni, because of their associations with the university, they are also contributing to, like, a recent donation to our newly created School of Chemistry and Material Science. So we should welcome all kinds of this investment. The bigger
Thank you. Before I give the floor to Professor Halas, let me thank Professor Wang, who has to leave us, unfortunately, to catch a flight. Thank you very much, if you're still here, for your very informative presentation, which is very informative also for many countries that used to have or still have a very developed system and network of research institute that's not directly related to education, and which the example of UCAS, you showed us how this system of institutions can be integrated. Thank you so much. Anyway,
thank you.
Thank
you, Chair.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah,
I do hope that we could keep in touch in the future and share more information for the higher education and research. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, and have a safe flight.
Thank you.
The next contributor to this financing issue is Professor Halász.
Thank you very much. Well, my feeling is that this opposition between fundamental science and applied science is overemphasized. So the contrast is not so big between those two approaches, and that's why I think it's an important development that in the European Union framework we are using increasingly the term frontier research. That's a major, linguistic innovation, which is helping us to fill this gap. And I assume that many of those who are here also knows the notion of a Pasteur quadrant introduced by Donald Stokes, which is again trying to solve this opposition between these two approaches. So I think that now the question could be translated into another kind of question. Are private companies willing to invest into frontier research, or are private companies willing to invest into Pasteur quadrant research? That's another way to put the same question. And I think that here it's not difficult to give a positive answer. Yes, they are willing to. Let me just mention one example from my own field, which is education. I was studying the investment activity of a Chinese education technology company. And this company has been investing a lot of money into cognitive science research. Is it surprising? No, it's not, because they can use that directly to develop their artificial intelligence system, and they can translate that very easily into commercialized products. That's my sector, education.
Yeah, well, just to add as a footnote, of course, we know from the history of science that in the 1950s, Bell Systems, when it still existed, was very central in developing modern information theory and the mathematics of information theory. Second, solid-state physics, which is the basis of all our radio transmission, and also the study of vision research, which was basically done at Bell Systems by a Hungarian expert, Béla Jules. So you're right that there is no need to have a sort of pseudo opposition between basic and applied, but the issue is still there whether private financing is going to reach issues like real frontier research that has a lot of chance outcomes and not a sure and certain result. So I think we could move to the next issue, which is partly related to what we heard from UCAS, and that the whole issue of, and that concerns the issue of the young researchers that heard at the last presentation. What's the relation between research productivity and teaching load, and how can you sort of, that's an inbuilt tension of research careers within higher education and teaching obligations in higher education. I raise this issue because I would like to hear some comments of how can you move ahead in this eternal tension of publish or teach. Oh, yeah, Professor Kolkov.
Yeah, thank you. I think that this issue is, of course, very important. It's clear that if you are involved in the frontier science, in the just very high level science, it's not good that you have a high teaching load. Therefore, the availability of institutions, research institutions, which are dealing with only with science, not with teaching outside universities, is important. But of course, on the other hand, those who are involved in science, they have to interact with students, they have to be involved in interaction and recruiting new students in their laboratories, especially young scientist laboratories. And for this purpose, this collaboration between the research institutes and universities, which I described in my talk, is important. The basic and this collaboration system where academic institutes and universities are collaborating in teaching young scientists. After all, for universities, the main aim is to teach students. For research institutes, the main aim is to develop science. Since these are two sides of the same medal, these two institutions have to interact with each other. On the other hand, if there is a classical university where it's both teaching and research are involved in one organizational body, normally this issue is resolved by the fact that the teaching load of most successful scientists is a little bit diminished, and teaching load of those who are, not so successful in science is increased. And in this way, this contradiction can be resolved. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you. Professor Bhushan.
I only want to make a contribution out of my experience. I think as I was minister, we brought in, looking to Germany, the Fachhochschulen. And I think what's now happening in Austria, that the teaching load is moving more and more to the Fachhochschulen. And so in the universities, they are better engaged in looking what university really means. There's one danger without that those who are in the Fachhochschulen are too far off the results of research, because that's also necessary, and vice versa. I think that the contact to the students and maybe to some developments of the society is not really happening in the right way. But I think the numbers of students will increase without any doubt. I think if we are reducing it, it would go in the wrong way. The real problem we have is in which subjects is the number of students rising and in which subjects is going down. It is a kind of, no, it's not market, it's preferences existing and so on and so on. But this will be always a moving subject.
Thank you. I would add to a little footnote here again, because if we continue a strategy that was mentioned by Professor Buzek, moving most of the teaching load to the Fachhochschule, or to the issue which was mentioned by Professor Kochlov, that the research-wise most productive university professors are teaching less, then the students are not exposed to the comprehensive knowledge of the best research doing faculty. So there is an internal tension. And in many countries, like in the United States, some universities are in fact requiring, like Berkeley is requiring the best research faculty to give every other year, only every other year, of course, every other year, a comprehensive class for undergraduates. And really, that they really, the students really meet the best of the faculty and so on. So there is a lot of tensions here. We also have a tension of time. So I think we would move to the fourth issue and then just skip the last one. So the fourth issue is, in many of the presentations we were listening to cooperation, tempus, other kind of movements, and institutional movements like the new proposal of the Budapest campus of Fudan University and so on. What's your opinion about who should move, the students, the faculty, or the institutions? Or what are the advantages of the different movements that it is?
Maybe I can start.
Yes.
Thank you very much. This is an excellent question and problem to discuss. My understanding is that the students must move, the faculty must move. Why? Because they are going to look around. They will have the experience of a Chinese university, how they do teach, what they do teach if they are staff members, or students can go there and study the Chinese culture and understand the way of living there, for example. Or they can make, these both groups could make a visit, short or term visit at Western European countries or other continent. I think the move of, what was the third option? That's a move of
institutions, universities or research institutions.
Yes, this is a very difficult and delicate question to my mind, because each university of the past and present were developing on the basis of a culture. And the culture cannot be imported or exported to another continent or to another society, because it could have a very reverse effect. And it could attract sympathy, but also it could initiate some sort of bad feelings. And that's why it is a very, very important problem to discuss first. This is a multidisciplinary research project, how to deal with this problem. And after careful analysis, they can have some sort of strategy to follow. And on the other hand, I think in this discussion, one should invite all players, because it could be a different effect. So for example, if a private university is moving around the world, that could be handled differently than the movement of a state institution. So these are further questions to these questions, but I think it's a very important and timely question for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Chen, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I agree with Vice President Hu that the students and faculty certainly must move. Like my university, we receive every year 7,000 foreign students, and we send out to about 4,000 each year. Maybe around 7,000 foreign professors visiting us, temporary or for some period of time, but we also send ours. It is important, I think, being in this globalized world, that people should be knowing the other parts of the world and different cultures, traditions, and socio-political institutions, then they are more equipped, better equipped to deal with each other, because working together is a very challenging job. So only by being able to knowing each other better, then we might be able to, foster collaborations among peoples and among countries. For the institution, I think it's a selective choice. Not every institution needs to move. But I think there is a reason for institution to move. That, like in China, we have now campuses from like New York universities, Nottingham universities, I think it's Liverpool universities and Duke universities. A lot of foreign universities have built a campus in China. We see there is a reason behind it, and we see also that there is a way that we can move forward together. So that is, I think, for Fudan, this time we choose to move, and we hope to repeat the same story, that how we can, working with all the local partners and move forward and together. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hi, Chair. Oh, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to introduce me. I'm the Director of International Cooperation Department in Shanghai Institute of Material Medical, Chinese Academy of Sciences. I'm so appreciate this opportunity. I can give some comments on this panel issue. On behalf of our Deputy Director, Professor Ye Yang, I think I would give some comments on this issue. We think all the students and faculties could move around, and such as in our institute, and we go to different programs through Pi-Fi and ANSO. We go to foreign students come to our campus to do the summer campus program. And also we have a different collaboration with the Belt and Road countries university, such as Serbia and other East Europe countries. And we also looking forward to establish the cooperation with the scientists in Hungary. And we also have the different young scientist exchange program. And we would like to invite the scientists from Hungary come to our institute to visit and to do the research collaboration. And also we would like to send our scientists to your country to do the science communication. So above of all, and we are looking forward to establish the collaboration. And thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Gulyás Balázs, who is a speaker tomorrow, has an opinion about this institutional movement issue. So Balázs, the floor is yours. Please share your ideas with us about movement of institutions and so on.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Csaba, and thank you, participants. And Csaba has asked me to share some thoughts about the Singaporean model. And tomorrow, together with Sir George Radda, who is, I see him, is with us today also, we will talk about the Singaporean model. But in this context, allow me to share with you one aspect of the Singaporean model which we will not talk about tomorrow, but I feel the need to raise this issue today when we talk about internalization of universities, including foreign universities in your country's own scientific landscape, and exchanging researchers and also knowledge, of course, together with researchers between countries and universities. So in Singapore, we have a model which is called CREATE, Center for Research, Technology and Enterprise, which has a huge campus next to the National University of Singapore's campus. And this huge campus hosts 10 to 12 different international universities, which in collaboration with Singapore's 6 major universities fulfill certain tasks for society. So it's a mission-oriented concept. The missions are related to human systems, urban systems, environmental systems, and energy systems. And certain tasks within these 4 major dimensions, 4 major sectors, are jointly approached or tackled by international, national, international, and Singaporean national universities. For instance, the programs include, and I'm one of the PIs on the Cambridge Center's program, are related to educational neuroscience, or other programs include, for instance, the Technical University of Munich, Harvard, MIT, Shanghai University, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Berkeley, CNRS, or the, I think, University of Zurich. So they are tackling certain society-oriented programs which are important for Singapore's economy, Singapore's science landscape, or the society of Singapore. So this is a model which provides you with a skeleton, and I present the skeleton here, of a possible collaboration between national universities in a country and international universities, so that their joint actions aims at a solution for society. That's it in a nutshell, and I keep it for tomorrow's presentation, when you will hear more about the Singaporean model apart from this part of the model. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Guyash. And as I said, we're not moving to the 5th issue because we are 40 minutes behind schedule. I would thank you at the end, but before I thank you all, I would ask those of you who are still here, if you have any sort of roundup suggestions, what you learned, what you think was important, and then I have my own roundup. I will give it anyway, but if any of the still present presenters and participants wants to say something, what she or he learned or wants to emphasize about today's webinar, please go ahead. Well, if we are all tired, I would really thank you for all the participants and all the other panel discussion contributors for their time to be here. I think the webinar served its purpose and was really in line with the commitment of ANSO and the commitment of the different academies participating in this organization. I would, it's a little bit subjective, but I would summarize the message, what we learned from the introductions and from the 6 presentations today into 3 messages. The first message is important as Vice President and Professor Hudets emphasized in his greeting words. There is an issue of relating the global, the regional, and the local. I'm going to go back to this because we learned in many specific issues, from the West Balkans to the development of international cooperation in the frames of the ERC programs and so on, that the entire issue of international cooperation and at the same time competition in the field of research policy regarding basic or fundamental sciences is very clear and important, and we all have to learn to understand things in our local, national, in the regional, and in the global context. The second is the issue of relationship between basic or fundamental science and innovation. We heard, interestingly, from our colleague from the Chinese Academy University, the still existing relevance of the Humboldtian message. It was very interesting that a Chinese colleague reminded us of the Humboldtian tradition and message, and how we should revitalize the intimate relationship between basic or fundamental science. As Professor Halas showed in the triangle, the relationship between research, education, and innovation is a very tricky relationship. We have to be, we never should really sort of juxtapose these aspects of the entire cycle of novelty of human knowledge, but we have to realize that they have inbuilt tensions. We as scientists, we want to go on and decrease these tensions and so on, but it would mislead us if we ignored these tensions. And the third message, which was very clear in the presentation of the Chinese Academy University and of Professor Kolkov's of the Russian experience, and also in the presentation of Professor Halas about the ERC, that we have a responsibility towards the young generation. It was very important for me to see how Professor Kolkov presented that the researchers in Russia, about almost 1/3 of the researchers are in their 30s. That's extremely important because from other sources, many big data resources, we know that in most scientific fields, the most breakthroughs come in people's late 30s. So that's really a generation we should be responsible for and support them with real possibilities. And I am closing this session with the hope that by international cooperation, we will be able to find further ways to support the upcoming young generations of science. The webinar is going to continue tomorrow, and we hope many of the audience today, and also many, if possible, of the active participants of today will join us tomorrow, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Central European time, which is 7 o'clock Beijing time. Thank you so much for being with us here, and I hope to see many of you tomorrow. Thank you. By this, I close the session.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Good night.
Well, I see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.